We're going live.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Good morning. Today is Wednesday, January 27th. It's 8:33 a.m. and this is a meeting of Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. Today we're going to continue our work on weatherization. Yesterday, Richard Fahey was in and really gave us a broad tour of all the actors and what the PUC called the ecosystem of people delivering energy services in the state. And one of our most important partners in this work is uh, DCF's program for weatherization assistance, the weatherization assistance program. We also have LIHEAP is another program they run, and so we want to revisit those programs and learn in more detail about how they operate, if there are any sort of COVID impacts on their ability to operate, and then looking forward, based on the bill we've been discussing, plus the shot in the arm that the governor gave all of our work through his budget address yesterday, look at the potential to increase the amount of work that we get done each year. And just for the record, I did hear from Senator Westman, who ran into a brief situation, and he'll be joining us a couple minutes late, but he is on his way. I have not heard from Senator McDonald. I don't know if you have, Jude. All right, well, so with that, let's get started. And before we get there, there was a report that Agency of Commerce and Community Development and the Department of Public Service put together, modeling the impacts on the Vermont economy of weatherizing. I think that was actually part of the Act 62 process, and very appreciative that the department undertook that work because, as best I know, it's sort of the deepest look at not just weatherization, the program in a narrow sense, but how it has an impact on the economy more broadly. So with that, Mr. Poor, I'd love to turn it over to you. Good morning, Senator Westman.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. And for the record, sorry, I just wanted to make sure I was on off of mute, but really for the record, I'm TJ Poor, Director of Efficiency and Energy Resources at the Department of Public Service. It's good to be back in your committee, Senator Bray, and it's good to meet you, Senator McCormick and Westman. And as I said prior to the start, eventually we'll be able to be back in person, and I think that has its advantages too. So thank you for the opportunity to discuss the analysis that ACCD and the department did this fall, estimating the economic impact of the state's core weatherization programs. I will just plan to do a high-level overview of the results and assumptions, and Ken Jones from ACCD is also here, and I'll leave it to him to talk about the innards of the econometric modeling that we did, and sure he can give you as much or as little detail as you desire there.
Okay.
Then we could be available for questions if that works.
Great. Good morning, Mr. Jones.
Good morning, indeed. I am Ken Jones, and I do economic research for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development.
Okay. Do you need to be made a co-host? Do you have any screen sharing that you want to do?
I have a little green button that says share screen.
Okay. I don't know if you have as part of the report.
I don't have a presentation. I mean, I have one from an earlier thing, but I don't have it up.
Senator Bray, I made both TJ and Keith, Ken co-hosts if they choose to share their screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Morning, Ken.
Good morning, Senator Westman. Yeah, as I say, I don't have a presentation that I was prepared for today. I mean, I can.
Okay.
Give me a couple minutes and I can take one.
Sure.
One.
We all have the memo that you submitted to the PUC.
Right.
Right. And I can pull that memo up to show some of the tables in it if it's helpful. I didn't have a presentation either.
Right.
I know that you all have the memo, and that's really the results are in there.
Okay. Sure, maybe looking at the tables together will be helpful when we get that far along. Thank you.
Okay, great. So, so I'll start with the result, and then I'll pull up the tables. But the economic activity associated with weatherization is significant. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. It's consistent with a similar study I managed for the department in 2011, which I realized last night was a full decade ago. But on the thermal programs of Efficiency Vermont was running at the time. It's consistent with other studies across the country, and honestly, it's just consistent with common sense as well. Although it's really good to have a real check on the latter. So I'm going to pull up the numbers now here. So just bear with me one moment. I'll pull up the table. Okay, hopefully you all can see my screen, and it should be a Word document.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the headline. It's this table 2 here that combines the income eligible and market rate programs that we offer are create an average of 400 jobs over the 2020 to 2030, increase personal income by 27 to 39 million dollars a year, and increase GDP by about $20 million a year. So those are really, that's the headline. Those are really significant results, and these are from the core programs and sustained investments from those current programs.
Okay.
So what do I mean by that? What we used was 2018 data from programs delivered via OEO, which Jeff will talk about at 9 o'clock, and our efficiency utilities, Vermont Gas, Efficiency Vermont, and BED, as well as 3E Thermal, who does a lot of the multifamily work. I think Mr. Fazy talked about all those programs yesterday. That totals nearly $19 million of total public-private investment. I'm going to scroll down to the input assumptions from the table here. So this is table 3 in the memo that shows the total values. So if you look on the right side there, you can see the total investment, or add the market rate and income eligible programs. Nearly $19 million in total public-private investment per year. 60% of that roughly was public investment. The incentive levels there resulted in nearly 1,800 housing units weatherized per year, and saved an average of 26% of fuel use. So these, although we just use these numbers and carried them forward, they're not a forecast of what's going to happen. In fact, as I think you know, budgets for the Efficiency Vermont market rate programs are expected to significantly decline starting in 2024. That's funded from revenues from the forward capacity market, and the capacity prices are going down, and so the revenues to Efficiency Vermont are also going down. On the other hand, budgets for Vermont gas efficiency measures are going to nearly double by 2024. So I just wanted to put into context that we just used a static forecast, and although budgets in the future are going to be different than what we used here.
Okay, I have a quick question in terms of if someone said, what kind of public investment was there, or ratepayer? Should I be adding the 2 incentive cost boxes side by side, basically 10 million plus 1.6? That's what we, quote unquote, we put into the program. And then that brought 7 million out from private parties that said, yeah, I'm going to contribute to the cost of weatherizing my home. And that's how to look at that collection of numbers right there.
That's absolutely correct. And you'll notice the income eligible programs from OEO are 100% covered by the program, and the ones delivered by the efficiency utilities usually, well, not usually, they do require private investment as well. And so you'll see, I think Mr. Fazy yesterday characterized it as a 5-to-1 ratio for those market rate programs. That's about right with these numbers here.
Thank you.
So I'll weigh in for a bit if that's okay.
Yep, I was just about to turn it to you, Ken.
Yeah, because I just want to get to some of the fundamental reasons why these programs are positive, and some of it is just common sense. When you have either participant cost or public sector costs through incentives, those costs are economic activity, and in this case, it's the employment of Vermonters to do the work and the purchase of materials to get those weatherization programs done. And so in that way, that whenever you spend a dollar, you get a dollar of economic activity. So at least that's a wash. What then gives you additional economic benefit is the fact that these are indeed investments. They're not just one-off economic activities, but they're investments that lead to the improvement of the housing stock in general, but specifically lead to the decrease in future costs for heating a home. So that adds another economic positive. But I also want to throw in something that we don't always do, but I'm trying to be more consistent with. And that is, anytime that you do spend money, it means on a specific project, it means you're not spending money somewhere else. And so you'll hear a lot in terms of these energy topics about the ability to keep money in the state. And for a state like Vermont, where our economy is pretty small, the opportunity costs for a program are comparing the money, in this case, largely spent in the state. Weatherization activities are largely state employees, and the labor costs are more significant than the materials costs. But you're comparing that with the opportunity cost of what people do with their money otherwise. And because we are a small economy, so much of our otherwise economic activity takes place out of the state. So it's for that reason that these, I'll say, directed investments lead to a significant net positive to the economy. So, you put those factors together, and again, that it's consistent with the common sense piece. We're taking economic activity, it's an investment with longer term results, it's largely spent in state, and we're reducing the fuel costs that we're reducing are largely out of state, and the opportunity costs that are these upfront investments are also largely out of state. So as you put all that together, that's kind of the fundamental reason why you will always, you'll always see a net positive for these kinds of programs.
Okay. Looking to see if there's committee questions on that. I do have one. So the opportunity costs, are those, when the dollars you're talking about, are those the dollars that homeowners contribute to their own projects that they could have spent otherwise?
Yes,
like
I included total costs. So even the incentive costs could have been used in other parts of the economy. So I included all of that as the opportunity cost.
Okay.
So that's, I guess you could call that a conservative assumption. Conservative meaning that if I didn't include the opportunity cost for the public sector investment, it would have been an even greater net positive. But I included opportunity costs, including the ratepayer costs that are part of the incentive and the public sector money for the low income program.
Okay. So in other words, if the taxes or the rates hadn't collected those dollars, someone would have, a private citizen still would have had that money, and they could have made a different choice.
Correct.
And they could have spent some of that. They would have likely spent some of that out of state.
Correct.
Oh, okay, got it. Does you referred to the housing stock, naturally enough, gets improved by virtue of doing the project. Does this include, is there any way to look at the growing aggregate value to Vermont of now you've got better housing, house by house by house, or
Yeah.
do you have to ignore that?
No. So full disclosure, I'm now a licensed realtor to help my wife. And so one of the things we look at is, are we seeing that market response to the investments that homeowners make to improve their house for energy purposes? Are we seeing that in the market price? And the answer right now is not formally, but informally, more and more of the clients are asking about, certainly about the costs to heat a home, but also about the investments that have been made, so that it is beginning to show up in that market estimate of what a house is worth. But yeah, and I know you folks have heard of the possibility of doing ratings for house, so the consumers, the people buying houses, have a better understanding of what the energy use is within a house. So we're getting there. And again, from just a client talking with individual clients, a growing number of clients are asking those questions. So that is going to be the mechanism to have it show up in market price.
Right.
If I might add one
TJ,
thing as well, another thing that is not included in the analysis is other non-energy benefits. I think that's one of the, I was going to lump that, what you just asked about, into a category, be non-energy benefits. And one big one, as you know, is the health benefits of weatherization. And I want to be explicit here, as was in the memo, that any benefits associated with improved healthy outcomes from weatherization are not included in this analysis. A few years ago, the Department of Health put out a great report on the monetizing the benefits from low-income weatherization programs. There wasn't quite enough data to have strong conclusions on the market rate, although I think they're there, but they're significant. And just to be clear, they're not included in this analysis. It was just outside the scope of what we were doing and the time we had. So just wanted to make sure you knew that.
And I'll throw one more factor in there. Sure. I think this is very consistently heard when you deal with people that have had their homes weatherized, and it's the comfort factor. Right. By reducing drafts, that sort of sealing up and reducing the air movement, but also the distribution of heat within a home. When it doesn't have so much of the air flowing out of the home, it's easier to heat a home with point sources. For example, a wood stove or a pellet stove distributes the heat much more evenly because you're not blowing the heat out through the roof. So that comfort factor is just a regular response from folks that have had their homes weatherized. And again, right. It's hard to monetize until we get the market to better understand what that really means for future owners.
Yeah, we've been banging our head on the wall somewhat gently for years on how could we get, basically an MPG sticker for homes, right. So that would-be buyers, it would be a transparent thing. It is somewhat odd that you buy just a refrigerator, you can see your energy costs. You buy a car, you can see your energy costs. Then you buy the biggest thing you've ever bought in your life, probably, and you can't really see sort of a standardized energy cost. I know there's a seller's property information report, SPUR, but they don't seem to be entirely standardized, right? So
that is correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, great. And the Department of Health number I remember just to, I think was that they showed by year 10 something like the value they assigned to energy savings was approximately the same size as the value they assigned to the benefits of increased health. That was, I think, primarily the occupants living with better air quality, getting sick less often, missing less work, kids missing less school, which sometimes requires parents to miss work. And then I think even just the decreased emissions gave a community health benefit. So, okay. Senator McCormick.
Years ago, I remember we were getting testimony, and I haven't heard much about it lately. And I'm wondering, and it's this, that also the level of weatherization affects the brain development of very young children, in that there are specific ages at which particular things are supposed to happen. And if they don't happen at that age, a few months later is too late. And one of them is that the kids should be crawling at a certain age, and the crawling affects brain development. And kids can't crawl on a cold floor. Kids who spend the winter, kids of a certain age who spend the winter on the couch as opposed to on the floor, have different brain development. I haven't heard anything about that lately. Has that something that sort of was an interesting hypothesis that has gone nowhere, or is there still research on that?
I'm not sure. I haven't heard that, but I do believe it.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell you one thing, that the Department of Health and the Department of Public Service have been working over the last few months to set up a concept where we've developed a concept paper that we're going to share with the commission in a few weeks, hopefully, that would really further the effort to try to improve healthy outcomes through weatherization. And we think about how, you know, as a state employee, there's a Live Well program, and Blue Cross Blue Shield, you know, funds kind of these healthy preventative activities that we can do. And for some of us, they make no difference in our health, but for other of us, they make a huge difference. And on balance, that's a good investment for the healthcare industry, because the healthy outcomes, health outcomes are improved. And so the concept is to work and try to enhance the, you know, raise the education level, enhance the investment of the healthcare industry, not to increase healthcare costs, but to decrease healthcare costs. That health department report, I don't believe it went into detail about the issue you're talking about, Senator McCormick, but it did say that the payback for things like asthma remediation is within 2 years. And so that's a really fast turnaround. There's pulmonary disease, chronic onset pulmonary disease is another one that's within 5 years, I think. You start to see really immediate results. And those types of things, if we can elevate that, Efficiency Vermont has done some work, but hasn't had the resources dedicated to it through its thermal programs to really focus on it. They're a partner in the concept paper that we're developing, and Jeff has been involved also with OEO, and so we're trying to pull something together that we can actually make the next steps in this area. It's going to be a long haul. This isn't going to be an overnight thing. I think it's a couple of year project at least to try and move the ball some here, but it could. I'm optimistic that it's going to have some real long-term impacts.
Mr. Poor, have you worked with Ludi Biddle on this? And I think there's also up in Newport. I mean, basically, from what I've heard, just anecdotally, but in testimony, that there have been cases where the hospital ends up writing a script for a weatherization project because they have someone who's returning again and again to the hospital, very expensive thing to be doing. And the cause for the relapse is environmental conditions at home. So they said, okay, let's make the investment in improving the home. And then the patient didn't come back or came back less often. And that those were, and I've heard down in the Carolinas that CMS has started to allow like Medicare, Medicaid dollars to be applied to exactly that kind of thing. This committee wants to talk to Commissioner Smith about whether or not Vermont might pursue a waiver that would allow us to, to make that part of our ongoing program as well.
Right. So Rutland Regional was one of the first hospitals in Vermont to do that, and that's right in Ludi's core territory, I think, with NeighborWorks being based in the Rutland area. And so that's the other side of the equation. I talked on the insurance side, but this project is going to try and do both with the providers as well. So it's kind of elevating and getting providers to focus on it and insurers, and getting both to really move the needle to lower healthcare costs and decrease energy costs. It's kind of a win-win. At least that's my hope. And on the you mentioned one other thing I wanted to respond to, but I've lost it right now.
CMS waivers.
Oh, right. So we have talked about that a little bit, and you definitely want to get the health department or DEVA in to talk about this. But my understanding is that it's certainly possible, and it's a challenge because we have kind of a limited set of dollars that are available. And so if we start spending dollars on weatherization, then we're not spending dollars on other critical programs. And that's a trade-off you guys deal with every day. And so I'm sure you're aware of it, but it's the total dollars from the federal government into the program are capped. And so it's more of this trade-off and shifting, but certainly get the experts in the room to talk about that.
Well, honestly, I think the weatherization program that we're talking about growing and developing over the next X number of years, to get to a higher scale, it's going to involve a lot of different actors doing more things. So,
Right.
Senator Westman, thank you for waiting patiently. You had your hand up a little while ago.
Actually, I'm probably going to wait on my question in this. I have more questions about REMI and underneath it. And it appears that you guys just took the REMI model and used that. And I'm interested in the factors that go in to create the REMI model and that you used underneath. So that's probably not appropriate question at this time.
Well, Mr. Jones could.
Yeah, I'm definitely glad to weigh in if the chair and committee want me to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, we've been trying to improve our modeling. So
I'm looking at this, and it basically says we use oil and propane, and we've separated out like bottled gas and wood fuels, and I'm trying to create a picture. I think this is our second or third day, and I'm saying this to the chair as much, our second or third day at this, and we talk about unit numbers for houses. We're talking about dollars in this. And from a natural resources committee position, the thing that I am most concerned about is reducing carbon in our environment. And from all of this modeling now, I can't quantitate where that fits versus the dollars versus the number of units, and I think it's important for a natural resources committee to understand how much carbon we're taking out of the environment. And so I think that in this more plays to the modeling.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right, the model doesn't specifically deal with the carbon, but in part because it doesn't differentiate the fuels at a fine enough scale. But we do have the ability to at least provide estimates on the carbon reduction based upon what we know are the general relative distribution of heating types between fuel oil, propane, natural gas, wood, and a growing portion of electricity. And the extent to which weatherization reduces fuel use, we can then translate that to carbon. And so, in fact, as the Climate Commission is doing its work, that is absolutely a required piece of analysis that I'm scaling up to be able to tackle, and using weatherization as an example to show, I'll say, the cost effectiveness on a per ton of carbon basis is a very reasonable question, and something we can start to provide. We can provide those estimates, and then we can look at this program compared to other programs that are intended to reduce carbon. So I know your question is a great one, and working on it, and it's not insoluble. And the REMI, and it does go beyond REMI, and TJ can weigh in too. There are other energy models that kind of work hand in glove with the economic models to show what the impact are on energy use. But we are getting there, and hopefully during this session you'll see more of that specific evidence about carbon reduction based or resulting from these different programs.
And I'll just add that our program administrators have data on the fuel saved, at least an estimate on average, fuel saved from their programs. And once you have the gallons saved, the BTU saved, you can calculate the carbon saved as well. If you're talking,
for me, I absolutely think that's true, but I think there's a difference between oil and propane. There's a difference between, somebody now that is using a portion of, there's still some people that use electric heat. For me to look at the decisions that I need to make going forward, if the reduction of carbon is at the top of my list, I have to balance that up against the economic savings, which I think are extremely important. How I can take low-income people, make their homes healthier and safer for them, versus the carbon reduction, and how do I measure that versus putting together a package to help lower income Vermonters buy a car that is that uses less carbon, when transportation is the number 1 carbon producer. So the balances I've got, and in the stuff that I've got so far, I begin to answer the question of how much carbon am I taking out of the environment with this? And I think it's an important component of this whole discussion.
Right. So I'll point you also to, as part of the annual energy report, we do a cost of carbon model. And so I think Ed McNamara and Philip Peacock were in to talk about that last week. I think that might start to get to kind of those trade-offs of, here's the economic, it's not a REMI type econometric model, but just the cost and benefits of the program with, as it relates to how much carbon they're removing from the atmosphere. And I think you guys should have a copy of that on your website. If not, I can get it to you, and we're happy to kind of go into more details and give you the underlying spreadsheets, et cetera, if that would be helpful.
Would to me.
Yeah, we did a sort of a preliminary walkthrough, and we do have the report on our site. So it was teeing up the topic, and there's plenty more to figure out. I know that one of the things we've talked about in like the last 2 years is coming up with sort of a redefinition of efficiency, naming emissions as the most important thing for us to reduce across all energy types, to address climate change. So how do you define efficiency? When one model I think we're sort of shifting to is the lowest cost per CO2 equivalent reduced or avoided, and that lets you look at transportation, lets you look at thermal as well. And because eventually, and Mike, I know my sense is, as Senator Westman saying, we need to do more work, because if we're going to be growing the weatherization program, for instance, and there are different ways to allocate the money that flows into that system, like the weatherization assistance project versus other initiatives, what metric are you using to help make your allocation choices? And then to make the problem even a little trickier, I wouldn't want to just apply that metric that I just mentioned severely, because then all the health and welfare benefits that WAP delivers would they would never be the low cost provider because they're doing more than just the energy work when they're there. So we need a nuance. We need to be clear and have some nuance to it so that we can grow a program and it will stay a healthy, cost-effective program. We won't disadvantage the OEOs that we're trying to support. So let me just pause there because that's a tough thing to work, sort out. And we do need. Do you have, Mr. Jones or Mr. Poor, a suggestion on how we might work with you to look at that more closely and build in sort of a policy statement or the metrics that help grow a program smartly?
Well, I can only tackle part of that, and it is the more straight economic piece. And as you note, that the nuance piece, that there are at least 3 cost effectiveness metrics. One is to look at the expenditure of public dollars and its relationship to carbon reduction. The other is the consumer perspective. What does the consumer pay to get those carbon reductions? And then the third is what we provided today is the overall state economic impact. So those are 3 different numbers, and each program therefore it benefits from looking at least those 3. But then, as you said, there are other factors that also oftentimes are benefits and sometimes are costs that also need to be considered that aren't easily captured in that straight dollar amount. But at least those 3 for every program can be, and again, it's something that I work on largely with the department too, to understand those at least 3 ways of looking at economic cost to accomplish carbon reduction.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right, Ken. And it can get very much into the weeds very quickly. And I think about how the legislature has set up our electric efficiency charge and what we collect and how much we go after and how we prioritize. And in that, in 30 VSA 209, the legislature has given the commission authority to collect the charge, and then you've given the guardrails and say you need to balance rate and bill impacts, you need to prioritize emissions, avoiding T&D, et cetera, et cetera. And if you that kind of structure where you put the guardrails and the policy priorities of this is what we want to balance, then putting it into a detailed process afterwards, I think that commission process is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very thorough. We just spent 1.5 years on it for the 3-year electric budgets. And it's, I think it does an honest job of trying to meet the different priorities. And so for what it's worth, I'd point you in that direction.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I know that we talked briefly with the PUC when they were here, just about I keep thinking of this as a funnel where there are different fuel tax monies that flow in. There are, the PUC floated out the concept of a thermal efficiency benefit charge or thermal energy benefit charge. There's discussion of bonding, different types of bonds, also pay-as-you-save programs that could go to the home, or it could go to the owner, or it could go to the meter. So there's, over time, I think we're going to have a variety of flows, and there's going to be some funnel, and this is the way I'm thinking about it, as a funnel that receives all that money. And then there needs to be a level of management and accountability because we're managing other people's money. And then there's the allocation part, and how do we set up as light an infrastructure as possible. That was also in the PUC report. Don't go create something new to the extent possible. So how do we be light, but we also have someone who helps us keep an eye on what's happening and make those decisions going forward? And right now, we don't really have a mechanism for it. We have line item investments in things, but we're ambitiously aiming for something on the order of a 5-fold increase over a decade for weatherization. So there would be a lot more money to manage, and we would need a rational way to do that. Senator McCormick, thanks for your patience.
Yeah, thank you. We deal with constituents and even with some colleagues who I think regard carbon reduction as somebody's agenda, but somebody else's agenda, and that the main who focus more on the with weatherization, the function of weatherization to keep poor people warm. And the argument is made that the path of least resistance, the most direct approach to keeping poor people warm, is pay their oil bill. Do you compare, just obviously I don't ignore the carbon issue, but if someone were ignoring the carbon issue and focusing exclusively on keeping poor people warm, on how weatherization compares to just helping them pay their oil bill? Weatherization as opposed to fuel assistance, because they are juxtaposed as adversarial by some of our colleagues.
Right.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, because I look at this is a classic investment. I mean, if you pay someone's fuel oil bill, that you get no return. You granted you are able to accomplish them staying warm this winter, but weatherization is an investment. And just like every investment, you try to look at the return, and that return is the longer term reduction in their costs to keep them warm in future years. So I think you can look at it. In fact, that the work that TJ and I present today is straight economic. It doesn't get to that aspect of are we getting more people warm compared to a fuel purchase program, but rather this is an investment. These are the returns, and it is positive for the state economy to make this investment. So I'm hoping that folks, that even if they don't have a carbon lens to look through, can look at a program like this and say, this makes economic sense for Vermonters.
Yeah, Senator Westman needs that in particular, serving on appropriations, because that's an argument you get hit with every year, is that we should put more money into fuel assistance and less into weatherization. You hear it annually.
That's what Matt Cota would say.
Right. Well, I thought one thing is, let me just check on the guardrails. My understanding was that LIHEAP dollars, only up to a maximum of 25% can LIHEAP money flow into weatherization, and Vermont is currently using 15% of its LIHEAP money for weatherization, was the number I heard yesterday. So that would mean we could go a little higher, but those LIHEAP dollars, it's federal funds that can't, for the most part, be diverted to weatherization. So I don't know that I'm just wondering how sound an argument that is to say, oh, we should put more in, other than only the state's contribution, I suppose, is where you can make that argument.
Yeah. Well, there's an annual argument in appropriations about how much state money should go into weatherization. And the people are saying, don't put it into weatherization, put it into fuel assistance.
Uh-huh.
Well, if I
It
could
has
just,
to be fought back annually.
having the two of you on this committee, I think for me at least, just helped me realize one of the problems. I mean, and really, if that is the annual debate in appropriations year after year, and we're putting more money there, I think the two of you just helped us realize a real problem.
Senator McDonald.
It's the give a man a fish or teach him how to fish. And that's the issue.
Well,
Senator Westman.
I would say that is the question for me in the piece, but the other piece about the individuals that you're talking about. And in the models they're talking about, you're making their houses better so they have a piece of capital that goes on in the future. But when I'm investing in weatherization, to back up from that, I at least would like to know how much carbon it reduces, because if I, instead of put $1 into their home to make them more energy efficient, I put money into the car that they're using, how much would that dollar reduce carbon and help them economically versus putting money into their home economically? So I'm trying to measure in the overall. I'm not opposed to helping the individual. And I certainly am not saying that weatherization isn't important, we shouldn't do it, and all of that. But if I have limited dollars, how can I, where's the place I get the biggest bang for my buck and help them economically? Is it totally in weatherization, or is it giving someone low income a grant to improve their transportation? So how do I know where the place that will reduce the most carbon and at the same time help them economically? And that's the measure that I'm trying to figure out even before. And I totally agree with Senator McCormick. We have every year the argument about, should I be keeping somebody alive today from freezing, or putting it into their house for the long term?
Well,
and I just want to add, I'm not back to my comment. I think the fact that Senators Westman and McCormick just helped us to realize that this is, an ongoing debate in appropriations every year, or a regular debate, and just helping us to guide us, not only that this committee is needing to do more with approps and with transportation is really important. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not looking for us to weatherize people as they freeze. First and foremost.
Well, that becomes some of the question.
No, and that's absolutely. I want people to be warm, but are there ways for us to work with appropriations to kind of to get at both of these in a way? So I appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody's commitment, and it just seems like we're more focused than ever on how do we reduce carbon, and it's some things we've done in this committee, but the big issues are without a doubt continue to be across the hall, and I look forward to that joint meeting coming up with transportation.
Senator McDonald.
The issue is not in appropriations. The issue is, how do you, we've been talking about welfare for poor people. That's what we've been talking about. And whether to do welfare this way or do welfare that way. We're also talking about reducing carbon, which is a different issue than welfare for poor people. And the way you reduce carbon is you weatherize. So we've been batting around plans for the last 6 years, which say you start collecting money on fuels, and you use it to weatherize homes. And if you're going to weatherize all the homes that need it, this will sound silly, but you can eliminate the welfare issue by doing it by lottery. If you've got if you do a test on homes, residences, and they're in the top third of residences that would best, that are wasting the most fuel, you start doing it by lottery. And it takes a couple of years and they're done. And then you get to the next level, and you get to the next level. That's how you make poor people whole. That's how you bring loads of money, hundreds of millions of dollars back into the Vermont economy instead of shipping it out of state. And that's how you make the planet more sustainable. But if you sit around here, or if we argue over whether we should weatherize a home or give them fuel assistance, we're back to arguing about what color do we paint a battleship instead of how to use it. So
I don't think anybody is debating whether or not we do one or the other, just for the record.
So if you could we would have spent some $1 billion a year and you had a 10-year plan, you'd know how much you had to collect from heating fuels to do it. And when you were done, appropriation, it doesn't have to run through appropriations, but when you're done, you have homes that burn less carbon. You have poor people that are warmer. You have a healthier planet. And if you're going to fund LIHEAP, the LIHEAP bill is substantially smaller. So those were our challenges, and we keep looking at. We seem to be unwilling to tackle what it takes, and we do this, year after year, decade after decade.
So,
right? And I guess maybe we'll keep doing it.
So,
Senator Westman.
And I'm all for weatherization but the question I asked myself from the beginning is, if I want to save on individual family money and I want to reduce carbon, and I know they need transportation in a car, and I know that their house needs fixing up, I have to ask the question, in some measure, where do we focus to save them the most money at the same time reducing the most carbon? And is it in the house? Is it starting something new with cars? And I think it's important when we go off in a direction that we know how that individual household unit, we can help both save money and reduce the most carbon, and at least know that before we put our money into these programs.
Great question.
Right.
But we're talking about weatherization today and not about automobiles. So, and we're not going to jump back and forth during this conversation to automobiles and back and forth. At least I don't think so.
Right.
So
it's true that so it's a good point. I don't think we're not going to sort it out. I think it's just great we have it on the table. We're clarifying what the questions are. Then I think so. That's one of the things we've talked about as a committee. What questions do we have? And I think Senator Westman's giving us a tough one to answer, and then, which is great. And then who do we need to hear from in order to answer it? It feels to me like we should be
I agree with Mark. That's no criticism of what has been presented here today. It's just what, right. As I look at the public world and public dollars that we have, I want to help the individual family and household unit save as much money as I can, but also know where I get the biggest bang for carbon in that. And I'm sure it's some combination of both, but.
Right. And so that's part of the outreach that we've started to our neighbors across the hall in transportation, to figure out how what we're talking about gets stepped up along with programs that I don't know, but my hunch is that TCI will become real someday, and I don't know when someday is. And there would be yet another meaningful revenue stream to tackle that originates in transportation and could address transportation issues. So thanks for bringing that forward. I would just, Senator Westman, if you check back to that report that that Ed McNamara brought in last week, there is that table that addresses exactly one of the issues, like cost of carbon reduction per type of measure. The winner on that chart is energy efficiency. And I think the most costly way to reduce was maybe something like electric school buses or something like that, with a whole range in between. Okay, so with that, sorry, one last quick question. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Wilcox. The LIHEAP dollars, I'm just trying to think about, so I'll put this question on the table. Eventually, we'll have weatherized every low-income home. Let's just take that as a given. What happens to LIHEAP over that time? Is there less and less of a need for it? Do the rules change so that someone can say, we really don't need as many gallons? What we should do is redeploy some of that money and to other complementary efforts. I just don't know if we're only doing 1,000 low-income houses a year, but it is accumulating. And what impact has that had on the demand for fuel in the remaining homes that do get LIHEAP support? Okay. All right, so if there are no more questions for Mr. Jones and Mr. Poor, then we're running a little long, but it was a good discussion that I didn't want to end just because the clock said 9, and move on to talk to Mr. Wilcox again about the weatherization programs in the state. Thank you for your patience. Let me just quickly check in with you, Jeff, to see if you need to leave at a time certain, so we make sure we don't run the clock out while you still have things to say.
Yep, no, I'm good.
Okay. So again, thanks for your patience.
Sure.
Wanted to, especially with 2 new committee members that know something about your programming, but you just heard, I'm glad you were here for this discussion, because you can see sort of the push and pull of what we're trying to make our way through.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad I was here to hear that. A lot of the talk about non-energy benefits, and yes, we save carbon, but yeah, definitely, I'm glad I was able to participate in that.
So the floor is yours.
Okay. So I have a 2-page overview that a couple of you have seen before. It's updated. I'll go through that fairly briefly. And you mentioned you'd like an update on how we reacted due to COVID. I can give you that, and then plenty of time for questions, and feel free to interrupt as I go along. So my name's Jeff Wilcox. I've worked for the Office of Economic Opportunity. We're housed in the state of Vermont, Waterbury, Department for Children and Families. I've worked in our program for 23 years, 9 at a local agency, which was called CVCAC then. It's now called Capstone, and then the last 14 years at the state. So our program, it creates warmer, safer, healthier, and more energy efficient homes. We've talked a lot about this. TJ and Ken mentioned a lot of this. It also saves carbon. It's housed in OEO, that's short for our office, because we're an anti-poverty program, and weatherization is for low-income folks. And it's an anti-poverty program that puts money back into low-income people's pockets via delivering an energy efficiency program. So we feel it's a really good fit with the community action agencies who work with low-income folks, and our office, who also work with low-income folks. So statewide administration of our program, again, it's through our office. We have three full-time people, myself being one of them. I'm the program manager, and we have two folks that help do training and quality control and day-to-day operations of our program. We have 5 local providers, actually 6 now. I'll talk about that in a second. The 5 local providers are 4 community action agencies spread out throughout the state. And the 5th is NETO, which is the Northeast Employment Training Organization, which is a nonprofit weatherization agency. NECA, the community action program up in that part of the state, does not have weatherization. In this last year, we've added via pilot with one-time funds, a multi-family weatherization provider. It's 3E Thermal, which is a part of Capstone, but separate from their weatherization operations. They provide statewide multi-family weatherization throughout the state. Happy to answer more questions about that later. Who benefits from weatherization? You've been talking about this. It's homeowners and renters who are income eligible at or below 80% of the area median income, which today for a family of 4, that's $63,200 or less, and you'd be eligible for no cost weatherization. There is a wait list at each agency, not as long as it's been in the past, but we do have a wait list, and because of that, we prioritize who we serve based on certain criteria. And these criteria are basically each get a different number of points, and it's called a WAP ranking. So fuel assistance, if the client receives fuel assistance, they get priority points. If a household is lower than 30% of state median income, they get priority points. The poorest of our households. If they're high energy usage, they get priority points. Family with elderly, disabled, children. And as time accumulates on the wait list, they get more priority points. So while the wait list, can be frustrating for folks, and it means we're not getting to everybody as fast as we want, it also allows us to prioritize who we serve based on the greatest need, those who need it the most. In SFY, state fiscal year 20, we weatherized 648 households. Now that was the COVID year. So happy to answer questions about that, but 1,227 total occupants in those homes, 379 were elderly, 246 were living with a disability, and 265 were children. The services we provide, once a client household's eligible, efficiency coaching is the first visit to the home. It's a person visits the home and talks with the client on energy saving behaviors and upgrades of electrical efficiency. They provide the EVT funded add-on program. During that visit, the coaches do a one-touch screening and referral of the household for any other health and social service programs that the clients are eligible, such as the lead-based paint program, Head Start, aging services, Vermont Quitline, etc. We've been expanding that program every year. Energy audit to identify the most cost-effective energy improvements. So that there's important in our program. It ensures the money we spend goes to the measures that are going to give the most bang for our buck, which I've heard a few times today. This energy audit includes a blower door test, an infrared scan, full inspection of attic, knee walls, basements, crawl spaces, every single surface of the home we're in, our auditors are in and evaluating, taking measurements. Then they bring that back to the office and determine what can be done. Energy efficiency renovation, such as insulation, air sealing, is the biggest return on investment work we do. Health and safety improvements are very, very big and very important. And it's another way that you talked about protecting low-income folks. Providing heat definitely does through LIHEAT, but our program saves lives. There's a lot of poorly vented, unsafe combustion appliance in our clients' homes, and we improve those every day, and sometimes replace them with higher efficiency equipment. We improve indoor air quality via ventilation, and like I said, address carbon monoxide and unsafe compliance issues. Every project gets multiple quality control inspection. The agency inspects their own work by a separate inspector than the person doing the audit or doing the work. And then our state, Zach and Josh, who work with me, they go out and we inspect 10% of the completed work every year of each agency. So quality controls and quality assurance is very important for our program. Impact, 3,882 homes were weatherized in the past 5 years. Approximately 1,000 homes will be weatherized in this current year, FY21, and part of that's catching up for last year where COVID kind of slowed us down. The average cost per job is $9,727 last year, and about 15% of that went to health and safety investments. Our estimated energy savings per home is 31%. So that's based on energy modeling of the home and the savings estimated. You know, we're a bulk fuel state. Very few clients have Vermont gas, so there is no good way to do an actual fuel study. 25% of the homes receive a handoff to another health and service program via that one-touch process I mentioned earlier. We weatherize single and multifamily homes, owners and rentals. It's no cost to low-income occupied households. Landlords are responsible for correcting any health and safety issues before our program spends a dime on energy efficiency measures. So they're responsible for making sure their heating system's cleaned and tuned, and any health and safety issue that we identify is corrected before we install any insulation. In FY20, our last year, 64% of the homes that we weatherized were one-unit homes, and 20% were small multifamily homes, like 2 to 4 units, and then 16% were large multifamily homes, which we consider 5 or more units in a building. Each year, approximately 30 to 35% of our homes are mobile homes. You can see our proposed budget here. The U.S. Department of Energy, that allocation just came out last week, and it's $1.6 million to our state. It's been increasing over the last few years. It runs anywhere from 1.2 million to now 1.6 million a year. The fuel tax, the HAP, Weatherization Assistance Fund, I believe will be 7 million, and IHEAP WAP will be 3 million, which totals up to 11.7, and then the one-time fund of 4 million. So the big picture, we're cost effective. Significant testing and analysis of every home to make sure the work we do gets the biggest return on investment, makes the biggest impact on our households, our families. We're effective. We allow low-income households to stay in their home by making it more affordable and safer. Comprehensive. We ensure no surface is left uninsulated, and the home is safe after weatherization. It's holistic. There's significant non-energy benefits to the program, as TJ alluded to. We've known this for years. It's hard to put a finger on the exact number. You know, the Department of Energy has done studies, and it shows that the non-energy benefits provide more benefit than energy savings. Currently, we're doing a couple of weatherization plus health, we call them, pilots with a couple of our agencies, and they work with the local hospitals and efficiency. Laura Katz from Efficiency Vermont is working with us. We're doing a trips and falls for elderly weatherization clients who have tripped or have fear of falling, and with UVM and the agencies, our weatherization crews, while they're weatherizing the home, are installing grab bars and raising toilet seats and stuff that, you know, doesn't take a lot of time when you're already there. And we're going to have a report to share with that in the next few months. I want to take just a quick second and read a I don't know if any of you caught this. It was in the Caledonia Record a month or two ago. It was a letter to the editor. It's a lady that said, you know, a while back I went to the Council on Aging in St. Jay to inquire about cost efficiency in my large house. I heard from the Northeast Employment and Training Organization, NETO. I was told I qualified for the free weatherization program. I was delighted because my house was historically felt like an ice cave in the winter and a sauna in the summer. This week marked the finish of a 7-day project that insulated my attic, cellar, and crawl space in knee walls with cellulose. The team that arrived consisted of Bob, Cody, and CJ. They were quiet, polite, and pleasant. They wore masks and had a plan for COVID precautions. They put down plastic on my floors and rugs. They picked up daily. There was no mess. I could not have been more pleased with the professionalism and thorough work they accomplished. I recommend that folks who want to age in place in their homes avail themselves of this service. I anticipate much less expensive fuel and cooling costs. I can notice a big difference already with how the house feels. Good things are happening in our community every day. Sandra from St. Jay. I just wanted to add that because too many times when we talk about our program and energy efficiency, it's all about numbers, but in our program and the others, it's about people that drastically benefit from the program in many, many different ways, not just putting money back in their pocket, although that is a significant one. So that was a quick overview. I hope it didn't go too fast, but any questions?
Yeah.
Senator McDonald.
Did you say it was one person living in the home?
She didn't say, but it alluded to that. An elderly person living in the home alone and
Okay.
able to stay in it.
Hope you gave her a home share number to explore.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something we could expand on our one-touch service.
You had mentioned a DOE report about non-energy benefits. If that's something you can lay your hands on and send to Jude, that'd be great, so that we can put it in our webpage as well as send it out to committee members. The other thing is your report today, which was very helpful, had a lot of facts and figures. Do you have it in a form that you could send it in so that we could have it to refer to? I was taking notes while I worked, but I couldn't really keep up.
I'm sorry. Lucci from our commissioner's office sent it yesterday to Jude. I will send it again. I assumed you had it. I'm sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay. I forgot to open that folder before you came on. So it's probably right there. Don't worry about it. If we need it, I'll follow up. It's my mistake not to look before you were on the screen.
Yep.
The figures that you had cited a figure of roughly $9,500 per home. And I'm just looking back at the report that Mr. Jones and Mr. Poor went through. And for the OEO column, they're showing a cost per unit of $12,484. So a pretty big difference. Can you explain what's going on, the different accounting?
Well, I don't know where they got their number. I can tell you where I got ours and how we report it yearly on the legislative report, which I believe we sent to your committee as well. That it's the report our office prepares for the legislature, and it gives kind of benchmarks every year. So in state statute, we have a job cost average, and the Department of Energy calls it an allowable cost per unit. That has gone up over the years. It was $8,500, and it's the budget amount that we hold our agencies. I don't want to say hold them accountable for, but it is. That's how we determine the number of units with a given amount of funds that are required to be weatherized. So when the job cost average needs to be X amount, you divide that by the total funding that the agency gets, taking out the admin in TNTA and a few minor costs. So that number I reported is higher than the budget. We're in the middle of a 2-year program year. Due to COVID, we amended our 1-year weatherization grants with the agencies and made it a 2-year grant because we were on hiatus for 2 months. We weren't visiting homes, weren't getting homes completed. So the agencies, you know, had costs that they weren't getting units for. So they have 2 years to kind of catch up. I don't know where they got their numbers. I actually, I'll check with them and see. They sound high. They may have included the total grant to an agency and divided by units. So part of what we call the job cost average, or part that is excluded from our figures, is an agency's admin percentage, which typically is 12 to 13%, and then training and technical assistance dollars in liability insurance. So they may be including, it may not be an apples to apples number, is what I'm thinking.
Okay. I see Mr. Poor back on the screen here.
Oh, hey.
I just wanted to confirm what you just said, Jeff. We took the total allocation of just over $10 million and divided by the project number of projects. So
okay, that makes sense.
So that would include all of those other costs that you just mentioned.
Sure.
Okay. And so I think while you're both here, if we are talking about growing the program, which we are, Gesundheit.
Sorry.
How would you suggest we use those numbers? I mean, for instance, like the admin costs, are they going to be relative? Is there some economies of scale here? So we could grow more units and we should be using a number closer to yours rather than.
Yeah, it's a good
TJ's.
question.
I'm just trying to figure out how we should
Sure.
forecast a budget if we're growing the program.
Yep. So when the program is at a funding level, you know, training and technical assistance dollars are still important, but the level won't be anywhere near as high as, say, during a ramp up for the first couple of years. And as well, you know, trucks and equipment will have to be purchased in order to ramp up. You know, the crew trucks that we use run $45,000 to $50,000 each outfitted, and that's for a crew of 2 to 3 people. So I would say we can give you information. You know, I would say don't take that into effect. How we do that, it's not a 2-minute conversation, but
Sure.
It's significant costs there that need to be considered for sure.
Okay. Well, and so it's great that the budget is proposed. You know, that's, as I was saying, it's a shot in the arm. It's a boost. We really appreciate, you know, seeing that money showing up on the table. What this committee has learned over the years was sort of the painful experience we went through with the HARA money, where there was a surge of funding that was one time, and then you had the expense of gearing up, which, as you point out, is sort of front loaded. And then when that the increased level of funding wasn't sustained, then you had to like pull back down. So I'm thinking, you know, there's a money side to that, and that I'm guessing that also means people lost their job, right?
Yeah, some people, you know, I lived through the era of weatherization. I started out as one of the state monitors, and then midway through I came into this position. So I wasn't there doing the planning at the start, but I'm quite familiar with the lessons we learned as a national weatherization network. If you go to Google and look up era weatherization, you'll see that many states, not many, too many, had significant issues. Some were shut down. You know, some local agencies had issues. Vermont, we did pretty well. We spent the funds. We learned lessons along the way. One of them is training and technical assistance. Training program is really important. Having time to ramp up, you know, get the equipment in place. You know, agencies would need probably likely bigger buildings. There's a lot to it. I think, you know, we did learn from it, but there's a lot to it. And I think you've been getting feedback from us and the local WAP providers on this. Sorry, I'm rambling and forgot the main point of your question. I hope I answered it, but there is a lot to it.
We're trying to build the program, but do it in a way that is
Right.
sustainable and cost effective. And so, for instance, while it's great that we're getting this one-time injection of funds, I'm feeling like the committee needs to, we're grateful for that, but I'm almost feeling like we need to ignore that one-time shot arrived, because what we also need to establish is ongoing funding, so that great, it's kind of getting a leg up, but we need to stay up.
Right. So one quick thing, I see Senator McDonald has a question, but one of the things I think the Department of Energy learned was that the weatherization program, while there was a good program in place at a lot of states, they told the president it was shovel ready, and that was not necessarily true. I think I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about testifying. Weatherization is a specific trade that takes a lot of training and a lot of competency to get the savings, get the carbon savings, get the energy savings, get the fuel savings we want. You got to do it properly, or you don't get all those things. You spend money, but you don't get all the benefits that you want. And that's so true. And you can actually cause more problems in a home than you're providing benefits for. You can create mold and moisture problems. So it's not just go to the home, throw in the measures, and we're good to go. You got to do it right. You got to be conscientious to actually get the savings that you're saying you're going to get. In weatherization, you can't just pull anyone off the street, or even a contractor, and assume they know how to air seal and insulate properly. A lot of our folks come from the contractor world, and as soon as they start working, they shake their heads and they say, "Oh boy, I really learned it the wrong way. I just building science is what we preach and teach," and a lot of folks don't know that. So it takes a lot to get somebody trained and competent to do this work, and then once they are, boy, we're unstoppable. But it's just not a program like, say, if we wanted to install sheetrock in everybody's new house, you can get somebody to do that, and you can see that it's done, and that it's done right when you walk away and pay the bill. Weatherization is not that way. It's something that you don't see the work really, and it's just ramping up. Needs to be slow and not slow, calculated and done properly, and we can do that. It's just like 100 million in 1 year and then down to 10 is that's a recipe for disaster, and the Department of Energy learned that.
Thanks. Senator McDonald.
Yeah, it was a big boom and then ramping back. You were talking about buying trucks. Were trucks sold at repossessed or sold at discounts with the ramp?
So we were actually lucky. I don't know if any of you remember the CVPS, Green Mountain Power. We received $10 million for weatherization from CVPS shortly after AIR went away. So there was a few layoffs, and then a lot of folks hired those folks back. We were lucky. A lot of the other weatherization states were not so lucky. A lot of layoffs and a lot of equipment being sold for a lot less than they paid for it. So we've been lucky, knock on wood.
Do you happen to know, I don't have from the governor's proposed budget, the recommend a line item. Do you know how much additional funding your program is slated to receive, and in what buckets it's proposed to come to you in?
No, so I just this 2-pager is all I have right now, and the total proposed for FY22 of our traditional funds, Department of Energy and our state funds, which includes a LIHEAP swap, was 11.7 million. And then we have a line item one-time general fund of 4 million for 2 years, which would be 383 additional units over a 2-year period. That's all the details I have right now.
Okay. Well, and I just, I'm trying to think on the fly here. Now, I'm trying to think of how much additional money. So 2 million additional dollars per year,
Yes.
basically. Okay.
Yep.
So that's not, if it's over 11, not quite 20%. Is
Right.
that a manageable growth rate for you all?
I think that is a manageable growth rate, right? One of the things we're working on, so our state is a crew-based state, meaning each agency has their own employees, crew employees that go out and do the air sealing and insulation. Many other states have hire subcontractors, and we're working as a network to bring on subcontractors to also, augment the work that the crews do. So that will help with capacity as well. And especially if a further ramp up comes along, we've issued an RFP as a network for subcontractor crew providers, and it was kind of timely as EVT's incentives went down. We issued this out. EVT forwarded it for us to their contractors. So we're hoping here in the next few months to bring on crew subcontractors at each agency, which, so we'd kind of be a hybrid state, have on crews as well as subcontractors.
Okay. We haven't, so I don't remember the year that this program got started. Is it 25 years old now?
Oh, no, the Department of Energy started it in 1976, I believe, Jimmy Carter.
Oh, wow.
Vermont might not have started it till 1980 with federal funds, and then 90 or 92, the fuel tax, the Weatherization Trust Fund was created, which significantly augmented our program funding level. So we've been around 40 plus years, and we've got folks in our network who have worked here 38 years. Wow. Quite a handful of folks that have been here a long time. Okay. So they've seen a lot of stuff come and go, and advancement in technology and the amount of work that we can do has changed dramatically.
Can you say a little bit about the, because it's a Title 33 program, which, health and welfare, it's not in the energy chapter, which I think is a surprise to me the first time I read that, and maybe others. And in my understanding is because it's an anti-poverty program, as you said at the outset, but in that sometimes we focus a lot on the homes weatherized, but can you say more about your hiring and training process? Because you're also helping people gain steady employment. Isn't that part of your mission?
We're definitely an anti-poverty program. I mean, the community action agencies, who are the providers, 4 of the 5 are community action agencies, do have programs for finding folks jobs and workforce development, that type of stuff, and many other programs. But, I think the best explanation of why it's an anti-poverty program is, there's so much more, clients, what we offer the clients is so much more than just saving energy, which, to be honest, I don't think they really care about carbon savings. They're worried about feeding their family. They're worried about if their car starts so they can get to work. When we come in, we involve them in the process, so we do have training on, working with low income folks and behavior, it's not behavior change. That's, active listening. We want to get their trust when we come in, and we want to, learn from them, from what their house challenges are. We really do a, significant job of more than just insulating their house. We're referring them to other programs, and the benefits they see. I used to go out and do the monitoring of the agencies before I got this position. And so many times I'd go out at a completed project that was done 6 months earlier, and the clients would, the folks I'm there with from the agency would say, "Oh boy, when we first came here, this man, his house was real cluttered and he really just didn't have much energy. But since we came in and did all this work, he's tackled all these projects. He's got a renewed lease on life." And that's why it's a anti-poverty program. We're changing people's lives, not just their home. We're doing it through their home.
Right. Well, thank you for that. Senator McDonald?
There was the discussion earlier about a 2-year program that's being put in place. Is that after 2 years, then what is it, open season again, or what?
So, I think you'd have, this is, recent news to us as well. My job at our office is to administer the program and run it as well as we can with our network. As the money comes, spend it the most wisely. Unfortunately, we don't have control on the checkbook down the line. I can't answer that question. I hope not.
We have talked as a committee in the past about trying to do 80% of the homes, and I think the chair says at the current level, Senator Bray, what is it? How many years to do 80% of the homes?
Well, I think, based on Department of Tax data for eligible people, divided by the current average rate, it's like a 52-year waiting list, theoretically.
How long?
5-2.
52.
52 years. So I think part of this discussion is that if it's 52 years, we're falling behind. We're not making progress, and how to tackle it over perhaps a 10-year period. And if you save 30% on the homes that you do, and you do 80% of the homes, that's got to be putting a couple $100 million, 200 to 300 million into the Vermont economy every year. You have to adjust for the dollar value 10 years from now. But that's a you call it about an anti-poverty program. That's also an infusion of dollars into the Vermont economy, and it hires people at higher wages. I mean, I cringe at the notion of sending people out for a 2-year program to buy more trucks and vehicles and get all trained up to do something, and then 2 years from now say, well, that was an interesting experience, but we have other priorities. So
I totally agree. And I'll just say our network, it's a pretty tight network with the 5 agencies in our office. We're up for the challenge. We want to be, we've been upfront with the challenges we've faced. Workforce is one of them. I'm not saying we can't tackle that and beat that challenge. I think we can. I think what we'd like is to know the plan ahead of time and the funding, and we'll ramp up, we'll train, and we'll do good work.
You are at our mercy, and in your position, I wouldn't, 2 years, a 2-year program and see what happens is better than nothing. And for us, we might take a longer view and say, that's a dangerous or an unwise launching to just have 2 years. We got, as the chair says, it's 52 years to get everything weatherized. I don't think I'm going to live for another 52 years. I'd like to see it taken off.
I think your predecessors years back, when they came up with the Weatherization Trust Fund, is how they tackled this challenge of, the Department of Energy funds went up and down every year, and what it did was it resulted in hiring and firing every year, and it was not.
They didn't tackle it; it was a block in the back.
Well, whatever they did, I think the intent of the state trust fund dollars was to provide a more level funding, and I've got history of the funds, and it definitely, kind of kept those ups and downs. But
thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Nibbling
yeah.
versus tackling. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and for everyone, Mr. Wilcox may want to tune in as well. Tomorrow we'll have uh, Commissioner Walk in the committee to explain the governor's proposal on energy funding that was in the budget yesterday, budget address. So we're all interested in learning more. How does it work? And again, I think, to Senator McDonald's point, I feel a strong obligation on the part of the legislature to find that we want to ramp up and do it sustainably. That was one of the key findings of the PUC's Act 62 report: robust, sustainable, long-term funding.
I totally agree. I hope what I was saying wasn't alluding to otherwise. I think our agencies would have a real trouble ramping up for 2 years and then laying folks off. That's just not what they want, what we want.
Right.
It's not successful.
Right.
But we'll do what we need, whatever we need to do.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is the PUC report said there is irrefutable, data to demonstrate the value of weatherization, and that's a term I've not seen in a report for a while. Irrefutable proof. So we know it's a wise investment, and there is the nuance that Senator Westman was pointing out. When we're thinking holistically, how do we do to step back from this conversation, when we came in this year, we said, okay, there's really 2 big areas to work in. One we know is thermal, the other one is transportation. And we're going first on thermal because of work done all summer and fall to get ready for this session. But we know that we need to come along on the transportation side. And I would say for myself, if someone said today, what investments would you make to improve Vermont's energy spending and greenhouse gas reductions? On the thermal side, I think this committee could come up with a pretty good list in 15 minutes. I think we'd have a harder time doing that for transportation. And so we need to pick up that piece as well. But I don't want to make the perfect the enemy of the good. We have an opportunity to make progress here. And I think my sense is this session, weatherization will move ahead of transportation, but we're not going to ignore transportation either.
Right. And one thing I just wanted to add, I've been fortunate to work for this program for 22 years, and I've been in a couple thousand homes and seen the work and talked with the clients, and we've evolved in these 20 years, but all along it's been just an amazing to see the benefits that the program provides and the changes and how thankful the clients are, and how, it's a tremendous program that I'm thankful to work for. So we appreciate anything you can do for us.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder. It's like, as you say, we end up from a fiduciary point of view and sort of policy planning. We have to justify we have to do the analysis that gets to the numbers, but thank you for reminding us that behind every one of those numbers, there's someone out there who's, living better.
Yep, definitely. For sure.
Are there any other committee questions for Mr. Wilcox? And so can you tell us, so Sarah Phillips is coming in tomorrow. Can you talk a little bit about what she does compared to what you do and how your 2 offices relate to one another?
Sure. Yep. She's the OEO director. Our office not only houses weatherization, but other anti-poverty programs like homeless shelters, et cetera. So she oversees all of us. I'm the weatherization director per se. So I strictly work on the weatherization side and help oversee the 5 local providers. So she's my boss and has a better handle on the high level budget of our office. So I believe that's what she's able to talk to you more about your question on what's this $4 million and look like, once it,
Okay.
I'm more the program administrator, and once we get the money, work with the agencies to get the work done.
Okay, great. And does she also, if we have LIHEAP questions, will, for instance, as I understand, I had mentioned before that I think Vermont does 15% of its LIHEAP allocation goes to weatherization. There's flexibility to do a higher percentage. I don't know if that's, I'm only asking not to argue for that, just so that I understand what are the rules of the road around making those decisions.
Yeah, she's fluent, so in the LIHEAP swap. So just so you know, it is a swap. We're not get the funds. There's no increase in weatherization funds through LIHEAP. They take the same amount of state weatherization funds that they give back to us, and it's beneficial for our LIHEAP clients. So it is a good thing, but she can talk to you more about the specific details of that for sure. And
Sure.
Richard Giddings is the fuel assistance chief if you ever need his info. He works part of DCF.
Okay, great. The swap, as I remember it, is that you, by doing basically a transfer, sort of like interdepartmental transfer, that you're able to use more consumer-friendly eligibility requirements than if you had to stick to purely the federal limits. Is that the basic plus?
On the LIHEAP side, they're able to benefit that way. Yes, their LIHEAP office. Yep. So we spend our LIHEAP swap funds to our state weatherization specifications.
Okay.
We spend it like state weatherization dollars.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Wilcox? Okay. So thank you very much for coming in and talking with us.
Sure.
Now we're gonna
you.
take a thanks again. We'll take a break now. We're actually now running ahead of schedule. I see a Paul Z on the screen, and I'm thinking that Paul Z is probably Paul Zabriskie, who's going to be speaking to us. I don't know if he hears me and can.
Good guess.
Pop up. Good morning.
Good morning.
So we're not scheduled to hear from you till 10:45, but we're ahead of schedule. So we're going to take a 15-minute break now. Can you start at 10:30 instead of 10:45?
Sure.
I'm guessing. Okay.
It'd be great.
Great. All right. And I did talk to Ms. Minter yesterday. I don't know if you're going to be joined with anyone from your team or you're the only one joining us today.
Hopefully, David Smitty Smith will be joining us.
Okay. All right. Well, great. So it is 10:15 on the dot. So we'll reconvene at 10:30 and get back to work on. Now we'll move out to the field with Capstone. Okay. And my reminder that I've been trained to say is the streaming will continue. So you may want to mute your microphone and turn off your video. right, it's 10:30. And we have a quorum back together again. So we are picking back up on weatherization. We were talking about with Jeff Wilcox about where the program's organized and managed out of. Now we wanted to get out into the field and visit again with Paul Zabriskie and his team at Capstone, one of the 4 OEOs or community action agencies that deliver those services. Good morning, Mr. Zabriskie. Good to see you again.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
I think, our check-in is a couple things. One is in the last 2 years, we've tried to work within the constraints we had 2 years ago to free up about $1.3 million out of the Efficiency Vermont budget to start to do work in thermal and transportation. Then we just did the bill last year that gets the $2 million a year, 3-year pilot to try to push that door open a little further. But this year we're really trying to walk through that door and get more steady funding at a higher level for weatherization work in the state of Vermont. And I'm saying weatherization, we also realize there's a need on the transportation side to make progress there, but today it's weatherization, that's our focus. So I'm wondering if, as part of getting us started, you can say if any of the things we've done have flowed through to your office at all, or your team, or is it mostly just been, through Efficiency Vermont? Second question is, how's COVID been impacting you, and does it limit your ability to do more, the kind of more that we're talking about at this point? And so let's just, and then anything else you want to do by way of introduction since we last saw you, which is already pretty much a year ago.
Yeah, thank you. For the record, Paul Zabriskie, I'm the Director of Weatherization and Climate Impact at Capstone Community Action. Since they're new members of the committee, I have interactions with a lot of pieces of the thermal energy puzzle. We run the regional weatherization program for Washington, Lamoille, and Orange counties. We operate 3E Thermal in cooperation with Efficiency Vermont, which focuses on multifamily buildings and works one-on-one with landlords. We operate Energy Smart of Vermont, which is a market rate provider of weatherization services, part of Efficiency Vermont's energy efficiency network. So we're working in low income, we're working in multifamily, we're working in market rate. We're also a certified refrigerant installer of heat pumps. I also, some of my other activities, I work with an NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, certification committees for energy auditors and quality control investigators or inspectors, part of the national certification. I'm on the Clean Energy Development Board representing your committee. And I also participated in the Energy Labeling Task Force that recently delivered a report to you folks. As a sideline, I also manage the Mileage Smart program, which is the high mile per gallon used car incentive program for income qualified Vermonters to get into a high efficiency previously owned vehicle. So I do sort of work in the transportation world as well, and totally understand how the challenges in working in both environments and finding the best efficiency and opportunities there. I invited today David Smith to join me. David Smitty, as everybody who knows him, has been with Capstone for 22 years as an energy auditor. He's our senior energy auditor. He's in homes of Vermonters every day, talking with them about their needs, their concerns, their opportunities, their choices, helping them diagnose, track down energy waste, and then providing the scope of services to our crews to execute the renovation work to reduce that energy, as Jeff noted, 31% on average. So I think what I'd like to do is first ask Smitty to just address a little bit about what we do, a quick overview of the world from his perspective, and also how we train and sort of groom professionals in this field. So Smitty, you want to jump in?
First of all, thank you for letting me join all of you. It's just quite a privilege for me to have an impact, hopefully, of what I've learned over the years of working with homeowners.
Well, welcome to the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. Thanks so much for taking the time in your day to connect with us. And one of the things that helps us the most is to hear from reports direct from the field. So thanks again.
My pleasure. In 22 years, I've seen a big change in weatherization. We're at a point now, it seems like it's, how can we go any deeper? How can we go any further? There's always examples that Paul's coming up with. And with you guys being part of it, this makes me excited, because the people that we see need as much help as they can get. We go in, we save energy, but we're there after saving the energy. It's a healthy, safe home for folks to live in. Our crews are well trained on what to look for to not cause those problems when they do see that. I say cause the problems. When you change the complex of a house by tightening it up and insulating it, you can change the chemistry of how the air stays in, doesn't, and moisture, and the whole 9 yards. We're well trained on all aspects of that. Everyone realizes what we're doing on the crews, the auditors. Great backup in the office with solving problems and getting it done quickly for the safety of the homeowners. The training, you have to have a certain knowledge and desire to be in this field. I took building trades when I was in high school, come out, went into the service, come out, started a business with my brother, sawmill construction, and thought we knew pretty well what we were doing. My body just kind of took a beating with the sawmill. I came to this program. Energy savings is nothing like building. They should be hand in hand, but they're not. There's still a lot of old builders out there that believe the way I do. I used to. We're seeing a change in that, but our work is still very specific and very, very exact. We're well trained. When last winter at this time, when the virus came around, Jeff and the gang at the state providing us training during the course of the week, put us all the weatherization programs in the state of Vermont on the same page, so that we all know what we're supposed to be doing. We can talk about it. There's always new angles to see something from. When we get together and share, it's really a great opportunity to learn, because we got good people in the field. And like I said, it's not just someone who can pick up a hammer. In fact, you probably won't find a hammer in any of our trucks. It's not carpentry, it's energy savings, and it's a big difference.
Oh, great.
Thanks, Smitty.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Smith or for Mr. Zabriskie, but are there ever places that you visit that they're sort of, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, they're sort of beyond, they're beyond worth fixing. Like there's so many things that are a problem that it doesn't seem like a good investment to spend $10,000 on weatherization if there are foundation problems and water problems with that foundation, and who knows, a roof and a bunch of other things. How do you make those? Do you ever see those cases, and then how do you deal with those?
Sadly, yes. Fortunately, not a lot. We have a number of other resources to draw on to try and help people make, say, structural repairs if you've got a rotten sill. But there are occasions when we're asked to weatherize a building that it's questionable whether or not it's actually a building. So it does happen, not often. And fortunately, we have access much of the time to resources within our network or within our partners at USDA Rural Development or other organizations to try and address those situations. I wanted to circle back to the second part of your question about COVID, Senator Bray, and just,
Yeah.
you know, the state stepped up immediately and put together a training program. So we didn't have to lay off people. We weren't at risk of sort of losing our staff. You know, we're already trained to do lead safe work. So all of our trucks, all of our crews are trained and certified in the use of N95 masks. And so all of the PPE that is required around COVID was already part of our kit. That's just what we do. So we're more intentional about it. We're always wearing masks in a home. We have a whole protocol that we've developed. So I don't think it's had a huge impact on our ability to move forward, other than the period where we were just shut down by executive order when everybody was just trying to get a handle on the spread, and thankfully did an incredible job back last March, April, May. So I don't see that COVID presents a huge barrier to our ability to evolve and grow in the coming year.
Okay. Are you finding that homeowners or renters that you're working with have become pretty comfortable with having, you know, people? I mean, because last March, April, right, we were all told to sort of shelter in, but now are people generally comfortable having you in their homes working?
I'll take that. Yes, very much so. We see many homeowners wearing a mask as well, which is very comforting to all of us in the field. And in keeping the distance in a mobile home is a tough thing to do, but everybody's careful. We move probably a little quicker than we used to. But as Paul said, we're well trained in the health and safety fields of our job aspect, and they just carried over to what the virus implemented. At one time, we said we couldn't go into a home if anybody was over 60. And I said, well, where's that put me? I'm well over 60. So we all had a good laugh about that. And it really put a perspective in our office about what we're really facing.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. That's good news.
I'd like to touch on just a couple of points related to the conversation that occurred earlier this morning. I was monitoring on YouTube.
Oh, great.
If I may. And
yes, please.
You know, in particular, the conversation about carbon reduction and valuing carbon reduction sort of on its own, and then in association with the other choices that we have for investment, choices and urgency. And I think the conversation, Ken Jones, I think, covered the conversation of non-energy benefits like health and safety and durability and comfort. I have to say, when I approach this, I look at our process and say, how do we leverage the fixed cost, right? That when we go into a home, there's every home we go into, we've gone through an eligibility screening, we've gone through efficiency coaching, and we've gone through energy auditing. So those are fixed costs before we start any renovation. And And how do we most effectively leverage those? And I think Jeff noted that 25% of the homes we go into, we make referrals to other social service organizations to help people, whether it's they want to join the quit line or they need help with any number of issues where there's social programming. We're the first people in many cases to cross the threshold and actually be with that Vermonter in their home to talk about their situation in their environment, as opposed to them having to go to some economic services office or some other place. So one of the things, it was mentioned that the weatherization program lives in OEO, lives in the social service world. If we lived in the energy efficiency world, we would also leverage that fixed cost to look at things like beneficial electrification. So right now, when we go into a home, we're not making notes about the electrical service coming into the building. Does the panel have room to add a heat pump? If, is there room for a 220 breaker or two? Is there room to add a car charger in that? And these are the things that we're going to need to be addressing, particularly for low-income households. They don't have the discretionary income to just make an investment in their home to change out the electrical panel so that they can put an electric vehicle in the garage or park it in the carport or out in the yard, whatever their circumstance is. So I think for me, one of the important things about our growth is that we continue to modernize and meet the challenge going forward. And that challenge, piece of that challenge being electrification, that we evolve our data systems to capture information and document the capacity in the electrical panel, the capacity for heat pumps, car chargers, and other requirements needed for beneficial electrification. Also, we don't capture a lot of data about wood heat and the opportunity to move from, say, an old Vigilant or some other stove that may be heating that house, or maybe standby, or maybe even have a fireplace that is largely unused. And a fireplace, from my perspective, is just a hole in the building. I'll telegraph my view on that. It just doesn't belong in a modern home, unfortunately. But we could be capturing information and providing services or incentives towards advanced wood heating opportunities. Now, pellet boilers is sort of the highest cost, highest route automated system, but even pellet stoves. So my view is if you convert to heat pumps in many retrofit situations, I'm not speaking to new build where I think heat pumps can really do the job quite effectively, but in retrofit, most of the time, I would want to see a standby energy source for heating that can run during a power outage and avoid having to run that heat pump when it's at its least efficient in its curve. So capturing information on wood, the presence of a wood stove, whether there's opportunities to install a wood stove or pellet stove, or put in a high efficiency appliance where you have an existing fireplace. These are all modernizations that I think we want to be looking toward. I think we need to think about other sources of funding to actually implement those. But if we have the data, we know where to go. When we've got an energy professional like Smitty in a home, we want to be capturing as much information about that building as possible so that we can efficiently move forward with upgrades as these projects evolve and mature.
So let me sorry to interrupt. I just want to double check. So you said you currently do not capture information while on site about the current panel, for instance.
Well, we capture some information, but we don't capture information that would allow you to sort the database to say, who do we know has capacity today to throw in new breaker, some wiring, and install a heat pump. And who would need to do a service upgrade or replace a panel in order to make that beneficial electrification upgrade.
And do you partner with EVT, or I'm just trying to understand how the relationship works mechanically as well. Like, do someone from the EVT team show up while you guys are there, or in the planning phase? I don't know quite how you do that.
We are agents for Efficiency Vermont. So
Oh, I see. Okay.
we bring Efficiency Vermont services with us when we come to a home. Related to sort of the Act 61 conversation, I would agree with most of their recommendations. I think the challenge is integration between the various providers and integration coordination. And what I'm talking about with capturing information about an electrical panel, the utilities incentivize the installation of heat pumps or car chargers, right? So they will engage at some point. We have no formal relationship with the utilities to help make that transition happen. So they don't know when we come across great opportunities because they don't know, because that's just not historically where we both come from.
Right.
So I think there's the challenges for all the programs to think about how we more effectively integrate. I don't think we need a new infrastructure. I think we need to tune the one we have.
Okay, right. So that the car charger or heat pump portion could be like a tier 3 investment on the part of the utility. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of? But they don't, because you don't have the relationship and or the data, it's hard for you to basically sort of pass a referral along to them as a particularly good situation for them to go explore.
It's not part of our scope.
Okay.
That I think that's where we need the lead from you to say, think bigger. I think that it's not a huge stretch for any of the entities. I mean, I think it is challenging to share confidential information about the people we work with amongst organizations, and we have agreements in places in most situations, but we can work through those. The process of who's eligible for what services is a bit of a challenge. If I were to go back to sort of what are some of the big challenges across all of these programs, eligibility is a tough one. It's different programs have different eligibility requirements, and it makes it very difficult to do sort of a really tidy sliding scale. If your situation is this, you can access these resources towards that. And where we minimize the free ridership and do the best job of providing the most resources to those that need the greatest assistance. My firm belief is that we all have to make this transition in order for this to work. We can't leave anybody behind, and it will take a lot more effort to move some than others. So going forward, we need sort of a cleaner structure to manage income eligibility, who's eligible for what services. Is that eligibility all about income? Is it means tested? There's many challenges, and the greatest challenge is we want it to be simple, because as soon as you make it difficult, you start to exclude the people who most need the services. But at the same time, you want it sophisticated enough that you're filtering out the folks that may not need as much help as others.
Senator Bright, may I speak?
Yes, please, anytime.
All right, thank you.
The protocol is jump in.
All right. As an auditor in the field, we gather a lot of information that's pertinent to our job at the moment. We also gather a lot of information that has no place to go. But being the people we are, we're always concerned about the homes, if it's safe or not, with whether it's got anything to do with weatherization. So we do have a lot of information that we don't necessarily write down. Just to view if they are eligible for to be able to charge electric car or a heat pump, the qualifications, when we get to the field, the income eligible, we don't want to say to a client, oh, I think you can get a heat pump water heater here or a heat pump heater. If they're not eligible and we say that to them, we're crushing them. If it was simple and more streamlined for us in the field, we could actually be much more effective and help our clients a lot more. Paul made some great points. I heard them through my ears, and I've never heard them put that way. And I just hope that they're heard and thought through. We can do a lot more, but we do gather a lot of information, and some of it's never used. So it's like, ooh, I wish it could be. So thanks for looking at it that way, Paul. It's great. Thank you.
So can you walk us through a little bit how you do that qualifying? I mean, does somebody have to, does it start with filling out a state form that says, here's your income and here are your assets, that sort of the general social services qualifier forms?
So weatherization application, I believe the last iteration of it was 8 pages. You know, and it's got sort of the, you know, name, rank, and serial number. And then there's, you know, issues specific to weatherization. What's your electric utility account? Some basic questions about, you know, is it a mobile home? Is it a site-built structure, multifamily? If it's multifamily, is there a landlord? That sort of thing. So that's sort of a weatherization. And our criteria is 80% of area median income. When I started working on our Mileage Smart used car incentive for people to get high efficiency 40 mile gallon per gallon vehicles or better, you know, what I see, if you want an electric vehicle, if you want incentives to buy an electric vehicle, you basically check a box. Right? There's no 8-page thing. You can get a couple $1,000s as a household with $110,000 income. Actually, I think it's $90,000 income right now. But it's check a box. That's, you know, so we have this kind of cultural thing that, you know, where if you're higher income, you're trusted to just check a box. If you're lower income, you have to fill out 8 pages. And when we get your application, if you say you're employed at Connor Construction, we have to send a letter to Connor Construction and they have to verify your income, which means, one, you as a applying client have to disclose to your employer that you're applying for a social service program. And 2, they have to be cooperative and reply back. And there's, you know, if they don't reply back, then we have to chase people to try and get, you know, small businesses to reply to, you know, envelopes stuffed with papers and that want signatures. And it's just a challenge. So, you know, the currently Mileage Smart, the program we operate in transportation, the bill was passed with weatherization eligible. So it adopted weatherization's eligibility standard, 80% of area median income. New EVs last year adopted $50,000 of adjusted gross income, which is for most of us in this call is a really simple number, right? It's at the bottom of the first form of your tax return, and you can find that number and know what it is. Unfortunately, it's also a number that can be very dated, right? Like if you haven't done this year's taxes, then your adjusted gross income is actually your income from 2019. And lots of people's 2019 income looks very different than their 2020 income because of COVID. So you have, it's a very blunt instrument. It's simple. It's easy to execute in the field, but it's not necessarily getting at the nuance that we'd like when we're trying to target precious dollars to the people who most need them for these services. So I don't propose to have the answers. I wish I did. I just want you to know that there's some real challenges here, and moving forward, I do think that part of just streamlining the efficiency of all of our programs relies on coming together on an agreed set of standards for how we're going to go about deciding who gets allocated what resources and based on what criteria. I wish I had an answer. I'm sorry to be raising problems and not offering solutions. But
well, problems, proposed solutions, they're all good. So I'm just, you're making me think of something like the colleges used to all have their own applications, and then they went. So I think, and this is way after I went. They went to the so-called common application, the common app. Is that the kind of thing you're thinking of? If there was like a common app for the state, and you might fill this thing out once, that then every program that has eligibility questions would use that single document? I mean, is that a step in the right direction, or am I missing the point?
No, I think you exactly got the point. I hadn't thought about the common app, but it is you know, do it once, be able to update it online. It gives you back a color code. I don't like ranking systems. So I don't think that we want to use your A class, B class, C class, or, category 1, category, but some methodology that Vermonters could utilize. Ideally, it's put together by a state entity that can cross-check data in it against other databases, so that when somebody fills this information out, there's always the potential that the tax department could verify an entry, and that it was sort of auditable from the desktop, and therefore, I think compliance improves when you have systems that are built and the consumer understands that the information is auditable. Yeah, something that's kind of clever.
And so you heard, so that long conversation about metrics, like how are we deciding which projects and the energy benefits and the non-energy benefits? And so I've been concerned for years that as we've talked in this committee about evolving our notion of efficiency from kilowatt hours, how many dollars to save a kilowatt hour, to using a generic emissions related one, because it's emissions that drive climate change. So this was, a CO2 equivalent unit and the cost for reducing or avoiding that unit. And that's pure energy. And I've always been concerned if that metric makes sense, but I don't want it to be used to the disadvantage of operations like yours, where someone might say, well, your overall cost per unit of energy saved is higher. Well, that's because my understanding, and you're saying it again today, is there's many more things you do. So I'm trying to think a little bit about who sits a level above this and says, yeah, we want a certain amount of money going sort of purely to energy projects, but we don't want to disadvantage our current ecosystem of providers who do more than energy work when you're out in the field. It's like, that would be foolish on our part, and we'd be going backwards. So have you thought about how you make award money in a way that lets you satisfy a criterion to spend money well. If they're only energy dollars, then we're missing a big part of the puzzle you're talking about today.
Yeah, I'll give you my opinion, and this I'm not speaking for Capstone here, because I'm totally off script. I think the challenge is really valuing carbon, and if you can effectively value carbon avoided, then that goes into a formula that looks at social benefit. And ultimately, I think that our investment in social benefit, and sort of the what social good is derived from public investment, and programs that deliver, win-win-win-win, energy saving. We keep dollars in the local economy to just sort of grow our Vermont domestic product. We provide health benefits that are actually greater than the value of the energy savings, and we provide carbon emission reduction, which is actually, on par with all of those. So I think that's how I view it. Is we want public investment to make society better, and we absolutely have to control carbon in that process. But we particularly want to focus investments in carbon reduction that provide a better world for everybody in all these other applications.
Okay. You were talking about earlier, well, let me pause for a moment. I don't know if there are any other folks that I want to ask. Well, monopolize the question asking, but I don't see any other hands up. Okay, so I'll jump in with another question. And that is, you were talking about coordinating the relationships between the different actors out there. So who do you think might play that role of facilitating better coordination between the different actors and the ecosystem of actors?
I can't say that I've thought that one through, Senator Bray. I mean, I can think of individuals that I think have an incredible understanding of all the moving parts. And, you heard from one yesterday in Richard Fazy. I think that the Public Utilities Commission is in a position because they have the authority to direct change in the EEUs, and in the Public Service Department. And at the same time, I find their process to be almost overly legalistic and
Right.
very difficult for people who are not part of that process to engage with. It can be very opaque as a non-lawyer working in this field. But I think it probably lives at the Public Utilities Commission, because I think it does require, because we've spread revenue sources, particularly, the easy ones are the ones that are regulated. So the DUs and Efficiency Vermont are sort of easy to wrangle because they all operate to the same master, as it were. And I think certainly the social service world can better coordinate with them. I think it's a challenge. I think they're not necessarily resourced to put time and energy, and I think it really does take time and energy and some professional skills to effectively engage with the Public Utilities Commission.
Right. Well, and we've floated this question out to them and the department, who that we're last hour saying, there's a funnel that is already collecting and will continue to collect a variety of funds. how do you hold them? How do you allocate them? And how do you evaluate the performance? And not be so single-minded that you can't see the social services or health benefit portion of the services delivered at the same time. So it's a good problem to have, because it's being brought to the fore by the notion of growing the programs roughly over time to fivefold, or 10,000 homes a year, et cetera, all across low income and non-low income programs, market-based programs. But we'll have to keep plugging away at sorting that one out. The concerns you've expressed, I've said directly to the PUC. And I think they do have some ways of responding more nimbly. The things that came to mind for me were on the smallest scale of net metering project. It's just filing an online form. It's a check a box. I think it's 15 kW and under. You don't go through the whole application and approval process like the bigger arrays. So there's some nimbleness there. They've also done some regulation of GMP that allows them to do a certain amount of, I don't know, this isn't the right word, but experimentation, like piloting things by simply filing a form. They've been given guardrails to work within, and then they can try different things within that space. So we should learn more from them about how that works, because I do sense that we want something nimbler than a rate case to respond to what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because rate cases can run whatever, year and a half, things like that. So, and I'm sensing you all need more real-time adjustments than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a piece of it is just getting the right people in the room, and they're all busy, and they're I don't think anybody exists in a silo. I don't think we're that separated from one another. But I think there's opportunity to better work together. I work with Washington Electric Co-op quite a bit, because they serve many of the rural folks in the 3-county region that Capstone serves. We see challenges there. Well, we have one that's coming up, I think, around the formula to use tier 3 dollars towards weatherization. Washington Electric buys savings from Capstone, and we reinvest those funds into additional units of weatherization in the Washington Electric region. And when we do that, we have to discount the energy by the heat rate. And I hope I'm not going too in the weeds here for you folks, but the assumption is that the energy that we're saving is being replaced with electricity, and therefore we have to apply a discount to those savings, because most electricity is generated by burning something, and hence you have this heat rate factor, which drops the value of the savings to a third of their original volume. Anyway, there's sort of like challenges, because the DUs exist in their world, weatherization exists in this world. We work in units, which is not a great metric for evaluating effectiveness in a program, in my opinion. I think energy savings or return on investment, from my perspective, is a better, or savings to investment ratio. But anyway, we think in terms of units. Not until very recently, we didn't even evaluate carbon savings in weatherization. So you have Efficiency Vermont focused on kilowatt hours, the DUs also, converting to megawatt hours. We're working in MMBTUs and units. So there's that disparate
Mhm.
units makes it just that much harder to communicate effectively and coordinate on things like income eligibility, which, you know, quite honestly, is not the world that those other organizations live in. You know, I think the reason that Capstone and community action agencies are in this environment at all is because delivering services to people, to low-income households in their home, requires a sensitivity and a cultural position that the utilities and Efficiency Vermont have traditionally not been great at. So anyway, I'm
Okay.
not sure I've gone anywhere with that. But.
Well, no, it's helpful. We know we're in a relatively early phase of working through the bill, and it's good that we're getting some answers as well as some issues on the table. You know, I'm always saying it'll get tedious for all of us soon. You know, what questions do we have, and who can we talk to answer them? So that's where we still are. Just a quick thing to make sure I'm following on heat rate. So I think of heat rate as like an efficiency rating for any particular way of powering something, like how much energy went in and versus what came out the other end that was usable. Am I on the right track, or I should take this all offline?
We could take this offline. Yes, you are accurate in that. The challenge is when you go from burning a gallon of oil to not burning a gallon of oil, that you should be able to claim 100% of the savings, not a third of the savings. You shouldn't have to apply heat rate because you're not replacing a fossil fuel with electricity, which is kind of what Tier 3 was conceived around. Was we're challenging the distribution utilities to electrify the fossil fuel needs of their customers, and so we apply the heat rate to that. But when we have a situation where we're not electrifying it, we're eliminating it. There is, you know, there's, in my mind, there's a hierarchy within the process we need to go to get to sustainability. The first is conservation, that if you don't need it, don't waste it. The second is efficiency. If you do need it, do it in the most effective way possible. And then thirdly, when you do need to use energy, make sure it's renewable. So it's conservation, efficiency, and renewables in that order in my world. So the challenge with the heat rate is that we penalize conservation as if it's efficiency. We don't, if we eliminate the need for something, we should be able to take the value of what we've eliminated, not 1/3 of the value, when we're comparing that investment against a different investment, which replaces fossil fuel with electricity.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. I'm surprised that when you cease to use something, you can't claim the full benefits of the thing you cease to use. Which,
well, I would be happy to take this offline, and I'm sorry for the rest of the committee.
No, well, we also deal with Tier 3, so
this nuance.
The other thing I think of Tier 3 is it requests that they reduce carbon emissions, but it doesn't necessarily say through beneficial or electrification. But I think it's reasonable, and reasonable as in reasonably self-serving, that they're interested in growing load. If they can grow load in a way that achieves the carbon reduction, why not grow load? Takes off rate pressure for all existing rate payers, and it helps stabilize the company. So I don't know that they're very inclined to eliminate load entirely, eliminate emissions without growing load at the same time.
Well, I think that's the difference between my working with a co-op versus an investor-owned utility.
Yeah.
And why applying the heat rate to conservation has never been a problem for the utilities, because it makes conservation savings so much more expensive than the other things they're doing, right? So, and I don't mean to impugn my friends at Green Mountain Power or any of the other utilities, but yes, the law incentivized them, and I'm a huge fan of it. I'm not suggesting that I think that there's any, other than a tweak on the heat rate. I think, that is working pretty well. And,
Right.
We're starting to get into the point where it's going to get hard, right? It's going to start taking some serious dollars, and that curve just gets steeper and steeper and steeper, and we have to address it accordingly. But anyway.
Right. So far, I mean, it's interesting / a little depressing how hard it is to make these transitions when these things are already in this early years. Entirely energy savings comes along with it. It's a net positive to anyone making a change because they're just saving money on the other end. There will come a time later on where the lowest hanging fruit's all gone, and then we're going to have to really buck up and invest in things that don't necessarily leave more money in our wallet, I think. But
well, there's still
happily
a
we're not-
lot of low hanging fruit. I think, Smitty, you can
Yeah.
talk to how, not just low income homes, every home.
Right. Okay. Well, great. So thanks very much for a really helpful conversation and filling us in on what's going on and putting some new information on the table that gives us some more things to learn about and work on together. I will give you a call offline to try to get a little more into the weeds, and just so I understand what's going on there on the heat rate discussion. And if there are no more committee questions, so Mr. Zabriskie, Mr. Smith, thanks so much for joining us. You're welcome to stay. We're going to shift gears at this point and look again back at the executive order that came from the governor's office about 2 weeks ago.
Great. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So committee, that concludes our scheduled witnesses for the morning. Before we adjourn, I wanted to touch base with you all on the executive order. So we took some preliminary information on it, both on kind of the legal framework in terms of how it's structured, to be plain about it, that it's framed in a way that says both House and Senate must disapprove in order to disapprove. So that's, I think, maybe the largest legal question in the simplest terms. And then there's the merits of the proposal being made. So I don't know to what degree people are interested in hearing more about the merits. There were a couple witnesses that we couldn't fit in last week that have a lot of experience around the system. One is John Groveman, another is Ed Stanek. And so we could hear more from them and understand. I think their focus would be on the merits of the proposal and help us come up to, learn a little more about the operations of the NRB and the district commissions. And then I think we could also have legislative counsel back in to look at the legal issues. I did talk to the pro tem about, just trying to coordinate our schedules. This one's sensitive, whatever. And so we are going to go ahead and, review the EO and act on it as a committee. So I don't know if we have those, we can hear from people on content and the legal framework, or if people, another thing to be just direct about it. I think if our concern is that we don't accept the legal framework, then examining the merits further of the proposal don't particularly make sense at this moment, we could come back to those as part of an ordinary bill, but we wouldn't necessarily be considering them as part of an executive order. As best I know, there is no such bill proposed, but it would not be hard to imagine such a thing being offered. So let me pause and see what's your pleasure around the room. Senator McCormick.
Thanks. I think I've got a handle on this, but I want to just verify it. The legal constitutional question was whether we need one house or two to override. There is no question that the legislature has the capacity to reject the executive order. Is that correct? Am I right about that?
So I'll say that is my understanding, but I think as we want to move towards making a decision on this, I want to, of course, have Ledge Council back in the room to make sure we're really dotting the I's and crossing the T's properly and all this stuff. But yeah, that's my understanding, that the opening whereases and then the closing sentence allude to needing to have both House and Senate act in order to disapprove of the executive order. The underlying statute that it cites says that it very clearly says either body may do so. That's sufficient. So there's a mismatch there.
If I may, besides a question, I just want to make a comment. One of the criticisms we've been hearing about Act 250 really for 50 years is that it's it's the state taking away local control. There's a movement now to have the towns evaluate some of the Act 250 criteria instead of the district commissions. We had the governor yesterday in his remarks say that one size fits all does not work for Vermont because our different regions and communities are all different from one another, and that should be respected. And it looks to me like taking away the powers of the district commissions and putting them in one professional state board is one size fits all. It's top down, one size fits all. And strikes me as a blatant contradiction. It's just an observation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think to be fair to them, I think they're saying, well, because you would pull up from the local district commission too, you'll have that local voice present on that board. Now, whether I'm not debating that, but just I don't want to ignore that they did have an answer for that, and I think they're presenting it as kind of a blend of state and local all in one. Senator Campion, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Senator Bray. I think in terms of the debate around one body or two bodies, I personally just wouldn't want to spend our committee time debating that. I think it should be both bodies, even if we just need one. I think it sends a message a very different message if both bodies do it. So I think spending committee time hammering out which is which, I don't think for me, I think we could be doing other things.
Right. Well, and I guess the question is, so we should have Ledge Council in, but I don't know if based on people's preliminary assessment of where we are, if the legal question about being instructed in the EO that both must, when the statute says only one is required, is enough for us to say, we're not going to accept the question offered in this form to us.
I understand that. I just think it's send it to the committee that deals with the Constitution. I mean, honestly, our committee I think, should just act, and we should work with the House to make sure that they too are interested in being on the same page as we are. And otherwise, I think even if it's not necessary, it's raising questions of, hey, the Senate did this, but the House didn't. Are they in agreement? Let's just do both. I mean, I don't see the point in really debating this. Unless indeed the House isn't interested, but I think the House is interested. Does that make sense?
So,
It makes sense to me. I call that the Jesse Owens response, which is don't even argue about the legalities. Do it their way.
Yeah, just
Win it on their terms.
right. Yeah, it's what's the point? I mean, this is not academic exercises are great when we have tons of extra time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so are people settled at this point? If you're not going to address the legal argument, then I think we would then be making a decision based on the merits of the proposal.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And if that's the case, then I think we might want to have more witnesses in order to just finish up a little bit more on merits. There were two things. So I mentioned Mr. Groveman, Mr. Stanek, and there are financial implications. I know that last year a fiscal note was done when a version of this proposal, apparently very close to it, went through the House. So maybe without having JFO start all over, we could ask them to tune last year's fiscal note on the proposed change. Are people?
I'm sorry, would you repeat that?
If something's freezing up.
Yeah, something's freezing. Yeah.
Last year, JFO did a fiscal note on the.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, would you speak up?
Can you hear me?
A little bit.
Put up your hand if you can still hear me. So I'm not sure what's up. I'm going to start yelling at the computer. The JFO did a note last year around the cost of the proposed change. So if we're going to examine the merits, I think one thing we would want to be aware of is any costs associated. Not that it's our choice. That's going to be a money committee that's looking at that. But I feel like it'd be wise for us to know what the financial implications of making such a change would be. Sometimes we pass a bill along to approach and we send a note with it. Okay, so I'm hearing an interest in getting more testimony on the merits of the proposal.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair.
I don't know why my thing is doing this, and I'm afraid if I leave, I may not be able to come back in.
You're muted.
We were doing fine all morning long.
We've
Can
muzzled.
you hear us, Mr. Chair?
I'm going to adjust one thing. Okay, how about that? Can you hear me better?
It's better.
Can you hear us?
All right. Yes, I don't know what happened there. We would have, there's a couple more people that were on our list for examination of merits. There's a fiscal note last year, which maybe could be tuned, or it may be already very close already on costs, and anyone else that you would want to hear from if we're going to be examining this on merits.
On the merit, I don't understand the merits question, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I mean, is this a good idea to change the board?
It might be. It might be a good idea. We've had some good ideas last year too, as a legislature.
Right.
And I don't see those ideas that we had in the legislature in this executive order, which tends to get into the what's mine is mine and what's yours I'm willing to negotiate. I always give credit to the governor when he sits down with us and we roll up our sleeves and we come out with something that he signs and that we proposed and taken his issues into consideration, the governor's consideration. But this is the second time in 6 months where we had a bill that, we did some give and take on trails, and our side of that bill got vetoed, and his side was done by executive order. And now we're back on the Act 250 issue, and how are the other considerations going to get dealt with if we don't sit down and work out the interests that both parties have? So.
Okay. Senator McCormick.
Yeah, thanks. I think also there are various citizens and citizen activist groups who hold forth and get involved from time to time on Act 250 issues that I'd like to at least hear from. Was it Vermonters, People for a Clean Environment? And,
right. So we did have
some of those. I'd like to know their point of view.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean specifically on this particular issue.
Right. Senator Weissman?
Yeah, I would agree with Dick, but I would also say on the other side, what are the is it business groups? Who is it on the other side that is the push for the administration to do this? And I think we should allow both sides to come in and have their say.
Okay, not just my friends.
Well, I think
I want to hear from my friends.
I just think we ought to throw it out there and see who wants to come. I wouldn't, I think.
Rich, I was agreeing with you.
No, I know you were, but
Okay.
I think in this, and I appreciate that you were agreeing with that, but I think in this, the structure of the way it smacks when Senator McDonald talks about, give and take. This is done in a way where it's only accept or reject, and the administration can't come back with another one. So it makes it problematic from the beginning. But I think it would be good for us to I wouldn't spend forever on it, but I think have both sides come in and give us a prelude to what it is. I'm not in the same position that the rest of you are, that and I don't think Dick is either. We were in this committee to hear the testimony that you spent, and we know you spent hours on it last time. So.
Yep. All right. So we'll learn more from the interested parties, and then coordinate with, as well as check in with Legislative Council. My hope is that we would do this all within 2 weeks, and so that we, move along for everyone's benefit, get to an answer sooner rather than later. And to the point of this door was only open for the first 15 days, and now we're in this kind of awkward refuse or accept, no negotiations posture. I also think there's an entire biennium that just started, and a bill can be introduced at any time. And even less formally than a bill, anyone could, if the administration, for instance, reached out to me today and said, we have language we would like to bring to the committee, I would certainly welcome doing that. So I want to make sure that no matter how we decide, that no one feels like we're not letting this concept, where we do have a space for it to move forward. What's awkward is to be doing it only through the lens of an executive order. Okay, so I'll line up witnesses and we'll come back to this question and continue to discuss it. And with that, it's 20:12, so we're gonna wrap a little early today. Thank you everyone for a helpful discussion. Anything before we adjourn, Based on the testimony you heard today, are there questions that come to the fore for you, witnesses that you think, oh, well, let's hear from so-and-so, because from what I learned this morning, now I do have some questions about this thing.
Which thing?
Any of them, you know, I just
Okay.
always want to make sure
Energy
that
efficiency or the Act 250 thing?
either one. I just want to make sure that
Yep.
the agenda is responsive to what you want to hear about. Okay. Well, I'll keep working on lining up witnesses. And with that, thank you, everyone.